be awesome.
Yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of the Man That Can Project podcast. I'm your host, Lockie Stewart. And if you are tuning in for the first time, welcome. And make sure you hit that subscribe and follow button. Today, I'm very excited and honored to have Sean Galla on, who's tuning in from Canada. Now, Sean and I were introduced and we've just been having a chin wag offline, and we've got so much in common. We love surfing. We run similar businesses, and I would just say great blokes. And I'm sure we'll have a good friendship after this. But Sean, mate, thanks so much for tuning on. You are the founder of Men's Group and based over in Canada, and you're doing some incredible things. And I wish I'd found out about you much earlier and what you're doing and the incredible stuff. Obviously, you're trying to change the narrative around Men's Group and how men perceive them and what value we can gain from them. And I know myself, I've taken away so much value from men's groups and being connected to people like yourself. But welcome, mate. And over to you. I'd love to learn a little bit more about you, what got you into the work, some cool stories you've had along the way of learning Spanish in Mexico and living there for a few years.
Yeah. Man, it's so good to be here because I started following you and subscribing to your stuff a while ago. And I was like, man, this guy, I really like how he talks about all this stuff. We need more good men like you out there, showing that this stuff is approachable and very useful. And so I just wanted to give you props right off the bat for doing what you're doing, man. I really resonate with it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah. So I like Lockie said, I run mensgroup.com, and man, I came by it honestly. I was growing up as an athlete, hockey player, so definitely grew up in that jock culture. Also had in a household that was very loving, but parents that didn't have much of an emotional toolkit. And so that kind of defined the rest of my life. A lot of disapproval and shame in the household, unfortunately. So I go out in the world trying to prove myself as an athlete, and then later trying to prove myself as a professional DJ. So in my 20s, I was DJing all over Canada and the States and Europe and those places. And really, I was just trying to do anything I could that would make me feel better about myself, And so I figured if I had a label, oh, wow, exactly how you said it. Oh, wow, DJ. It's like that's what I was looking for, right? To sort of fix the low self-worth void that I had from my upbringing. And so I went out and did that. And that was great, getting to experience the pinnacle of nightlife, and then fell in love with a woman. And she was from Spain, wanted to move down to Mexico, get some sun, and I wanted to learn how to surf and learn Spanish. And we planned to go there for a year, and we ended up there for 6 years.
Is that just the dream?
No, it was actually ended up being the opposite. So the first year was the dream, right? Because it was surf and Spanish and learning about a new culture. But the remaining time there was a bit of almost more like a prison sentence, to be honest. I was desperately lonely. And dealing with a lot of internal struggles, emotional stuff, relationships with family and a couple other things. And I just didn't have the people around me that knew how to be supportive,
What kept you there? Was it the relationship, or?
It was the relationship. It was a very healthy relationship, and I loved her dearly. And it was also the lifestyle. Like, again, I was clinging onto that from some self-worth points there, like people were like, wow, Sean's living at the beach doing the 4-hour work week thing. And,
yes.
And I just love the lifestyle of surfing every day, and, came from Canada, as you said, so we don't have much of that here. So yeah, I don't know. It was such a good lifestyle that I think I was attached to that, but really I wasn't that happy.
It's interesting that you say that, because even just saying that, I didn't get to ask that question while we're having a chat offline, but I was like, that would have been the sickest 6 years of your life, eating burritos, tacos, surfing. Yeah. That's just the dream.
And then on Facebook, that's what everybody saw. They're like, holy, can I swear in your podcast?
Yeah, man, I'm all about the swearing.
So they're like, holy shit, Sean's got a beautiful partner. He's surfing every day. He's, fit, obviously, because of the surf and tanned. And wow, what a life, And my girlfriend, because she managed the pretty fancy hotel down there, we got to travel to other brand locations of that hotel, and so we traveled a lot and stayed for free and in these swank places. And so it looked like I was living the dream, but really I felt quite sad.
What was it that the disconnect? You said, obviously, with relationships with family and things like that missing, because I think this is important and I'm grateful that you're going to touch on this. Well, I hope you will. I hope you will. Because there's a lot of people that especially in the social media culture, we're following people's lives on Instagram, on Facebook, and it looks like they're living the dream. So, sometimes we feel like we can't talk to these people anymore, or maybe everything's going well, but deep down, as you experienced, there is shit going on, and it just because you look like you live in the dream doesn't make you exempt from experiencing everything that you experience, which I'm sure you'll share.
Yeah, and as I went on in my journey and started this men's group, it was like it ended up being a lot of really flashy looking, successful, big name guys. I won't name drop here, but guys that went on to host the big podcast that we all watch now and read, write the books that a lot of us read, and on some of the TV shows and stuff. And they all had similar stuff going on. That was what one of the big takeaways for me from that first men's group project for entrepreneurs was like, wow, I'm not the only one with this stuff going on behind the scenes. Everybody had some kind of challenge they were facing. Doesn't matter how successful they were or how polished their life looked. If you spent time with them, as I did, whether you're traveling or at their houses or whatever, it's like they had stuff. So going back to Mexico, yeah, I just kind of felt low about myself. I had very low self-worth. I had a tumultuous relationship with my father, and just didn't know how to deal with those emotions, didn't know what to do with them. And so tried to escape them and was trying to work on them, but didn't have an avenue, didn't have anybody to talk to about it. So, and then that resulted in all sorts of unhealthy habits, binge eating, porn addiction, all those kinds of things that so many men I now know deal with. It's like, that's that was my coping strategy, because I had no healthy male role models to show me otherwise,
It's crazy how common it is to not have a like a father figure in our life for a lot of people, even though our parents are there for a lot of people, or maybe not
Yeah.
for everyone, but it's still not the role model that we're desperately craving. And we also don't, as you said, you don't have the emotional toolkit, but even just the toolkit on how to build other relationships, or even just seek out those mentors, which is probably what led you to the men's group, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And don't get me wrong, though, my father is an incredible man, such a loving guy, cares about me greatly. We have a great relationship now. But he was a guy who probably, like many men, just didn't have the equipment or didn't have the understanding necessary to raise, a kid in an emotionally supportive way because of how he grew up. Like, he grew up with 11 brothers and sisters. His dad moved from Ireland when he was 15 by himself to escape working in the coal mines, which he'd been doing since he was 11. So
What?
like, he's got a dad who sets out for his own life when he's 15 on a steamship, crosses, the world
Yeah.
to build his own new life in a new continent. And then that guy goes on to have 11 brothers and sisters. My dad's right in the middle. So he's not getting much attention or love. So it's not really his fault either,
No,
So, but that's the dynamic that played out. There's a lot of disapproval and shame in our household. So there's just something I deal with moving forward. And I guess that's something that I still deal with today to some degree, but it led me to men's groups. And so I'm grateful for that.
do you mind if
How
we,
that all,
sorry, do you
yeah,
mind
so
if
go
we
ahead. No,
touch on the disapproval and shame? Because I know
Yeah.
I carried it around for a long time and I wasn't even aware of it. Like, I just
Yeah.
felt shit. And I
Yeah.
know there's so many blokes out there who are walking around just feeling shit, and they aren't really
Yeah.
aware of what it is. So I guess
No.
disapproval and shame as well are probably a good place to start. What was that like for you? How'd you, work through it? Or I know you said you still have it a bit today, but how did you, I guess, take that first step?
Yeah, I'm in such a better place with it today because I took that first step. I mean, see, look at you, man. You're good looking, you're fit, you surf, you got this great
And I
mission,
love you
but it's
already.
like,
You're the
yeah,
best.
but it's like, yeah, exactly. But it's like, and you're walking up the stuff. So am I, we all are. Yeah. And again, all these entrepreneurs that I worked with in a men's group, same thing. They all had it. And so for me, you know, um, disapproval was used to try to get me to not make mistakes because they loved me. So it was a good thing. Unfortunately, how that actually played out in my personal life is it made me not feel good about myself, just feel kind of low. Took a lot of things personally as a result, because like everything that came across me that was some form of rejection or some little proof that I wasn't good enough, it would like pick at that wound, and it'd be like, oh, but I couldn't admit that either, so it's just kind of like this personal struggle where it's constantly just feeling emotional lows and getting upset and um and struggling to do work or be in relationships and just kind of on an emotional roller coaster. I felt like a friend of mine said it well. The first guy that convinced me to work on this stuff, he was a really successful guy, entrepreneur, and he lived in Manhattan. And we were walking down the street one day, and he's like, Sean, it felt like somebody, a child was driving my bus. Like there was a little kid who was like, angry and upset and screaming and causing these tantrums. And that was how he was acting before he started to like actually, investigate that and work on it. And so that's how it felt for me. Just irritable, low, insensitive, insecure.
Man, that's spot on. Because I truly believe as well that there's so many men who we're walking around in men's bodies, but there's still so many of us who are emotionally boys. And you nailed it there with how we react to things and how we process things is just not a way that I believe men should, work with things. Essentially taking ownership for how we think, feel, act, and behave, and learning to understand and one, be aware of it, but learning to understand so that we can work on managing it. Because if that happens, we just, as you said, we might turn to pornography, alcohol, drugs, various other things to escape.
Yeah, because what other strategies are there, right? Most guys never get exposed to talking about this stuff, like a conversation like what we're having right now.
Yeah.
A lot of men surprisingly come into like our men's groups and think that there's only two emotions, happy or angry. Like unfortunately, guys just don't have this kind of exposure, and that's why you're doing what you're doing, and why I do what I do over at men's group.
So for you, like going through all of that and then getting your first men's group together, like how did that all come? I guess we jumped a few bits, but going back to Mexico, obviously year one was awesome, but the next 5 or so years was, you felt lonely and carried that shame and everything like that. So how did that sort of lead you to men's groups, etc.?
Yeah, great question, man. Probably 2 or 3 years in, I just like I knew that I was facing these challenges internally, and the people I tried to talk to about it, my surf buddies or whatever, weren't super responsive. Now, luckily, I had met some great entrepreneurs because of some projects I worked on in the past. Through DJing, I started a business that was quite unique, teaching people how to DJ online, and it was the first online DJ school. And so I met all these great entrepreneurs from all over the world at conferences and stuff like that. And so I had these great friends that I could have these conversations with, but they weren't where I was. And so at the time, Facebook groups were a new thing. So I just threw a bunch of my friends into a Facebook group, women, my brother, a bunch of friends who weren't entrepreneurs, and then nobody participated except for these entrepreneurs, most of whom were quite successful. And so it turned out that they were just none of them had these kinds of conversations that we were finding ourselves in: relationships, boundary setting, communication, how to emotional intelligence. And so we just started talking in a Facebook group, and it kind of went from there.
So why do you feel though it was the entrepreneurs that stood out in terms of engaging in that kind of conversation? Is there anything that sort of stands out for you? Because I've got the same, very similar thing within our community as well. So I'm very interested to see if I can get some lessons from you, learnings from you.
Yeah, this might feel a little confronting to somebody who's listening who might fit that category, but basically like the really successful entrepreneurs I know, a lot of them are really successful because they've been trying to fill some void. So like the reason why they're hyper successful, it's like the cause and the root and the result of the same thing. And so there's that, like what's driven them to get there in the first place is usually low self-worth or fear of some kind. And then also if that's been your strategy to try to like manage your emotional experience in the world, then the idea of being vulnerable and sharing that you're not that successful person that you've been, I guess, working to be, that's a very scary thing, right? And so a lot of these guys just have a lot to lose. At least they perceive they have a lot to lose as far as their image and their credibility and their brand or whatever.
Yep.
So a lot of them don't get into it ever.
Yeah,
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think we sort of time back into when you said the hockey player and then you built yourself into that DJ. We're creating a persona for ourselves, and we can't ever let that down. Because when I see it, like we work with a lot of lawyers as well, and for me, that's just an industry where just the ego and trying to be the big dog is so important to them, but yet they're just they're showing the next generation that comes through, this is what's expected, even though they're all hurt. Like much like what you said, it looks on the outside, this is what needs to happen, but fuck, on the inside, we are broken.
Oh yeah, and in their personal lives, that's where you see, like in their home lives, that's where it would come out, like, you know, domestic abuse or drug abuse, or, you know, cheating on their partners, you know, or
Yeah,
repeatedly, or just just, you know, like a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of those people, but I got to observe some behaviors where I was like, oof, like bottling it up can blow out in some pretty nasty ways, you know?
definitely. And it's
Yeah.
how for yourself, like going, were you always a good communicator, or was it something that you
No.
just, yeah,
It's something I don't know. Definitely not. Because I was so insecure and shy. I was such a people pleaser. I had no boundaries. I was such a nice guy. And
still seem like a
so,
nice dude?
yeah, I mean, now I'm a good guy, right? Which is different
Yeah,
than like a nice guy who just wants
true.
to please all the time. Yeah, thanks. You seem like a nice guy too, man.
Cheers.
And yeah, yeah, definitely. But I had to learn how to communicate. I learned how to set boundaries. I had to learn how to communicate my feelings, especially. Like, I don't think I cried from the age of, you know, 18 to or 17 to like 27, you know, like I had to learn all that again. So couldn't communicate around any of that stuff, which makes things difficult in relationship or even at work, because like I mean, the nature of life is adversity. We're constantly running into challenges and feeling things about those challenges. And it's like, how are you supposed to operate in the world without being able to communicate around that? Right. So made things difficult.
100%. What
Yeah.
was, yeah, like, did you find obviously through the groups, and for everyone listening, like we're going to dive into a lot into the men's group stuff, because there are so many people who don't really understand what it is, how it works, the benefit. There's
Yeah.
like this stigma around it almost. It's like for
Oh
even
yeah.
for me when I was like, I'm putting one out, it was like I just thought people were like, is this like an AA meeting? And you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just lads. Like we're just getting together and you're gonna learn a heap of cool stuff. And as you've got on the website here, I love this. It feels so good to hear a guy say, "Oh man, I went through the same thing. I feel ya. Here's what I did, and here's what I learned." And
Mm.
I've never summarized that it like that, but that pretty much sums up everything as well. Like we can learn so much from each other, and creating an environment like what you do is perfect for that.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you, since you get it, you know, and you're somebody that a lot of men look up to. Yeah, I think man, sorry. I side note, can you edit this?
Yeah, bro, 100%.
Yeah, yeah, because we're on a huge heat wave here. It's 46 degrees Celsius today. So I'm like cooking hot, and I'm noticing that like I'm slow to respond. So anyway,
Hey,
sorry. If you notice that, if you notice me
yeah,
sweating and
mate,
being
I
red.
think it's
Anyway.
to be fair, I don't even know. Like, I would leave this real and raw for what it is because I think it's
Oh,
sick.
cool.
Like, I think
Okay, yeah.
it's
Fair enough. That's all
every,
good. Yeah, feel free to.
everyone who
But
knows. I don't know what the is that. Are you Fahrenheit?
no, Celsius.
That's fucking hot.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's banging. Yeah, we've never had any heat like this before. So I'm like, it's like 9 p.m. here, and I'm red in the face and
Mate,
sweating and
if I
like.
was in 46 degrees, I would be in a world of pain. I would be having a fan on. I'd be having someone to the side, like
Yeah, yeah.
washing my face down.
Oh man, I turned all that off before this because I didn't want to ruin the audio. So it was good for like 10 minutes, and now I'm like, oh boy, I'm starting to sweat.
Crank it
But
on
that's
if you
fun.
want, bro. Like it's fine. I don't
You're
want
just too good looking, man. I'm sweating all over the place here.
This is the other thing for everyone listening. I think real life happens, and that's what I think so powerful about even our podcast is I don't really edit it. We just let it roll because we're
Right.
fucking human, and
Yeah,
sometimes we
all
put
good, man.
hands off when we shouldn't.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I like the natural part of it too, you know. Yeah, dude, back to your question. Sorry, I blanked on it, but I remembered what you asked now
It's all good, man.
after a
All
few
good.
laughs there. Yeah, so huge stigma around men's groups. They're for losers, right? Um, I have some pretty like controversial views on this too. I've been gotten into some back and forth with people around them. So basically, like if a guy has a challenge, whether it be boundary setting or with communicating at home, or maybe some unhealthy approaches to dating or whatever, right? And he acknowledges that he recognizes that he has nobody to talk to about that, and he goes out and he finds a tool, whether it be a coach like you or a men's group like us, and he takes action. That's a winner. Like these tools are there to help you win, versus the guy who's like pretends like everything's fine. He's a coward, hiding from his feelings, right? Not facing the reality of what's happening in his life. And that's unfortunately how a lot of men operate right there. They're living their lives, distracting and numbing and running from their own feelings.
Fucking oath.
You know, like in a sense, how pathetic is that? It's also very understandable because we were never taught how to do it. But it's like, you know, so I'm really trying to. I've seen over and over again, like, you know, in these men's groups, that like men's groups are a tool that can help you win. You know, and so I think everybody can benefit from that kind of thing. Talking through things with people, getting empathy, getting feedback, getting guidance.
And
Those are
just
all
being called on his shit. I
as
love
well.
it is. And as you said, I can definitely empathize and show compassion because we're not taught this stuff. But I also think anyone who's listening to this is taking action because they're actually investing time in conversations like this. But if all you do is listen and you don't implement or take action, once again, you're no better off than the person who isn't aware that you can change this stuff. And unfortunately, like I love that you're calling people out as cowards, because if that's the one thing that goes fuck off and it gets their attention to then you can have that conversation, bravo, because otherwise they're going to continue to go through their life not really understanding what they're experiencing, what they're feeling. And it's the reason why suicide is at an all-time high.
Mm-hmm.
Violence, addiction is all increasing.
Yeah, especially in men. The stats in men are insane. And all these movements are happening, Me Too and Black Lives Matter, which honestly needed to happen. There's some great learning there, obviously. But like a lot of people are pointing the finger at men. And honestly, rightly so, given all the, you know, things that came out, the way that some guys are behaving, but nobody stopped to say, well, why are men behaving this way? Like, wow, those are some pretty like sad things those guys have done. Maybe they're feeling sad. Like what's led to them actually, you know, getting to that place. And for me, I know that when I've done some things that I'm not proud of, or when I've been, you know, done things that are out of integrity or whatever, it's because I don't feel good myself, you know.
Bang on. That's a good
Running
thing
away from those feelings. Yeah.
Yeah, for people to think about. Like I'm the same. If I'm hurting or angry, like I'll generally try and make someone feel the same way, because it's a weird way of making myself feel better. But I think when I say that, it's just me trying to take the attention off myself.
Yes.
You go, cool. If I upset my missus, maybe now I can try and fix her problem as well as creating it, which is a weird way to think. But I think a lot of us, you know, aren't aware of that. And that's what causes a lot of relationship breakdowns or busts up with your mates or whatever it is.
Oh, definitely. And just like a lot of anxiety and stuff to deal with yourself as well. So, you know, once I learned, I was lucky because I just stumbled. I created this group and then these conversations started unfolding in front of me. And once I realized that like this stuff is inside of us, whether we like it or not, and you either deal with it or you don't. And if you don't, it's at your own peril. Like I started to investigate it. And luckily I had guys around me who were doing the same, you know. And that's why I say it's you know, I say it's cowardly kind of in good humor, because I was that same guy before who was running for like, you know, 10, 15 years.
And I would have been running right beside you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I still do from time to time, right? There's still days or weeks where I just don't want to look at my stuff, or where I numb out those feelings or whatever. So I think it's a very human thing. And part of that process of recovery from that is like, you know, unpacking all these human systems, all these, you know, defaults we go to. You said like blaming other people, or, you know, whatever. It's like, those are all things that, you know, are difficult to get into. But then on the other side of that, it's like you end up having a much easier experience in life. Like I feel so much more grounded and content now. I don't get triggered nearly as easy in this stuff. I just have more joy. Like I notice the birds in the trees and stuff, because I don't have that stuff inside me that's wrestling around and all twisted up and, you know, getting in the way of all that.
It's that sense of calm, 100%.
Yeah.
Do you find blokes that come along to the men's groups, like, are they there? You know, I don't know whether you run fortnightly, weekly, or however that runs, but are they there all the time? As in terms of, some people think I can only go there when I'm absolutely at rock bottom.
Yeah.
But for me, the way I think about it is like, well, I don't go to the gym when I get unhealthy. I just go there because it makes me feel good. There's prevention, all this sort of stuff. And that's why I see men's groups as well, as like just get in there and continue building that muscle and mental muscle, communication muscle.
Yeah, good question. I mean, there's both, right? There's guys that come to us in desperate times of need or desperate times of crisis. They've just found out their wife is cheating on them, or their wife just left with the kids, or they're going through court stuff, or, you know, who knows what. but then we have guys who just, the majority of our community is just guys that like recognize that they have a real, just a subtle isolation. Just like they have some friends and they have family, but they don't feel like they can talk to about the real stuff with their friends and family, and maybe it's because they don't want to burden them or stress them out or whatever, but they don't have a place to talk about the more meaningful stuff that's on their mind, the personal growth stuff. And so we have a lot of guys that come just for that reason. And like you mentioned, a lot of them are lawyers, doctors, investment bankers, architects, teachers, like really successful people, but they just like want to be there to be around these conversations, to hear how other guys think about things, to learn more ways they can do it better. And those are the guys that I honestly see getting the most value, is the guys that just show up every second week and are in the forums answering guys and meeting guys and jumping on conversations, because over time that really like affects you. There's so much research that shows that the people you speak to and surround yourself with can have such a tremendous impact on your success, your happiness, your well-being, and also likewise the adverse effects of, if you have one negative person in your social circle who's unsupportive of you, how detrimental that is. It's actually six times more detrimental than having a happy person in your life. Yeah. So that shows the cost of surrounding yourself with the wrong people and the value of getting into something like this, where you can get around people who are having those positive conversations, trying desperately to be better men. We have like 300-pound biker bros. They're all tattoos and probably are biker gangs and stuff coming in. And we're just like, just serious straight bros that you'd never imagine being in a men's group. And they're like, everybody around me says that I shouldn't be feeling anything, but I'm kind of tired of that and I want to get into that a little bit. Or, maybe I am responsible for my relationship failures or whatever. And that's fucking awesome.
Fucking hope.
Yeah.
That is sick. It's almost like sport, right? Where teams study other teams and how they play, what their moves are. I don't know how hockey works, but rugby and all that sort of stuff, where you have strategy and teams try to learn it so they can obviously defend against that or attack to that. And it's the same with learning strategies from other blokes. Like, you're an expert in a heap of stuff that I'm not, and vice versa. And together we can collectively share experiences that help us navigate through the shit that's going on in our life. And
100%.
when you've got 10 blokes in a room or 20 or whatever it is that are all on the same, or all prepared to share similar stuff, man, you can work through some stuff. Like, you can gain some great insight and knowledge and perspective, because the pain that, the emptiness, whatever it is that you're experiencing, you can work through at a rapid rate, as opposed to going, I'll just figure this out myself, or I'll try and run away from it.
Yeah, it's so much more effective and efficient to just ask people. And a lot of guys don't like, or bounce it off guys, a lot of guys don't like to admit this, or, but like, we're hardwired for that, right? 2 million years of evolution where we lived in very small tribes, and because that's the only way that we could fend off these really strong wild beasts that were stronger, faster, bigger than us, is to be in community. And in those communities, you'd spend every minute of every day with people, because if you're alone, it meant you could get killed by some wild animal lurking in the bushes, right? And so that's how we're used to being. And a big part of that was learning knowledge from people who are older than us, or who are showing us how to hunt or gather or whatever. And so that's deeply in us. And so men do well working through challenges together, hunting, going to war, building houses, those kinds of things. Men, obviously those aren't all positive experiences, but men talk about them as though sometimes they're the best time of their life, even in war. They say it's weird, but those days were the best days of my life, because they felt like they were part of something and they were learning from each other and they were working together. That's who we are. A lot of guys don't like to admit that, or they're unaware of that, but that's how we're hardwired. And unfortunately today we don't get that opportunity very much.
Definitely. Especially, I know for myself, when I left sport, because you had that camaraderie, you had the common goal with rugby. And then when I lost that, I was like, shit. And I still got plenty of mates, but it's not like we're not all working together for something. So you lose that common ground in conversation, which is why we need to develop that, the ability to communicate better, the ability to build rapport, but also hang around people who have common interests and similar goals. It frustrates me. And I don't know whether you see a lot of blokes doing this, where people complain about certain people in their life, yet they still continue to hang out with them. It's like you said, the effect. I didn't realize it was 6 times more of
Yeah.
a damaging impact. But they're like, oh, no, that person drains every time I'm around them. I'm like, why do you keep hanging out with them? It's
Yeah,
not that
man.
you're better or worse. It's just disassociate from it. Like take ownership of that.
Dude, but people like across the board, this is a blind spot for pretty much everybody. It's like people don't understand the cost of having like of not being intentional about your relationships, and people are afraid to be lonely or their own issues, their own daddy and mommy issues, which I talked about myself earlier. Like those come out in all these different ways, right? And they often come out with regards to our relationships. And so maybe a guy's keeping somebody around because they remind them of their father. Maybe they're keeping them around because they make them feel a certain way like they did when they were younger. Or maybe they just haven't realized what a huge impact the people around you can have on you. Like it's so understated. I can't oversell that idea. The research is there. This isn't opinion. This is like science. The detrimental impact one person can have on your life, slowly it like chips away. You don't notice it all at once, versus somebody who's positive and supportive of the changes and goals you want to make, and who wants to talk about those things. And it's like night and day.
How would you handle if you may or may, but how would you handle for those listening who have that one person that they're going, fuck, I
Yeah,
have
fuck.
how would you best handle that situation to maybe limit time or remove them from your life? Because, yeah, I think it's probably a common thought that goes through people's minds.
You ask such great questions, man. This is awesome.
I'm
Yeah.
asking it for myself.
Yeah. 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 I mean, man, it's an ongoing process for me, as it is for you and as it is for everybody. Like I actually had to cut a guy who was a reasonably very, very close friend of mine for 5 years out recently, because he stopped putting effort into our relationship. And they say the quality of your life is directly proportionate to the amount of uncomfortable conversations you're going to have. And I found that to be very true. It's like, if I'm feeling like a person isn't, giving me, and not giving me, but if it's not a mutually beneficial relationship, if I am feeling dragged by somebody, down by somebody, because I know now the opportunity cost of like keeping somebody like that in my life, I'm ruthless. Now, for me, those conversations, I'm not often very direct, because it could be interpreted as hurtful. Depends on the person. Depends on if I want them in my life later. So if it's somebody I do want in my life later, I'll be direct and I'll address it. Like with this friend, I was like, man, I've stopped reciprocating social invites because you haven't been very accommodating for my needs, and have been quite dismissive and kind of gruff, and unfortunately didn't take that well. And so then that was the end of the line. And if we received it well, we might still be in contact. But with other people, if you don't foresee them having a future in your life, then I just slow fade them.
Thanks for
Because
sharing that.
why go through that conversation? They feel bad and you feel bad. And I used to be under the mindset of like, oh no, I'm going to help them grow.
Yeah.
But that's such a douchey thing to like assume responsibility for, like, who am I to try to help, say where their journey should go or what they need to learn, So now I'm just like, no, it's beautiful. It's acceptance. They have their path. I'm on my path. They're going in different directions. Even if somebody still wants to be in my life, sometimes it's beautiful to let them go and find somebody who wants to be there.
Definitely. It's just everything you're talking about is just banging on taking ownership for everything, but doing it, obviously, we don't want to be pricks. Do it in a respectful way.
No,
but the most
you don't want to ghost people. You don't want to be a dick. You don't want to
yeah.
call people out,
Yeah. It's just, there are certain things in life where we have to put ourselves first, like, because for you to have the biggest impact, for you to have the most fulfilled life, like we've got to prioritize ourselves and the people that get to spend time around us. And especially when you're doing what you're doing, Sean, and for those who are listening, I believe everyone who listens is investing time in themselves. So with investment in self, I believe puts you in a position where you have more to give, because you're looking outside the scope that you've been given or you've grown up in, and it adds more value to more people's lives. So I think choose those people wisely.
Yeah, in general, boundaries are like something that comes up every single day in men's group. A lot of guys, come to us after reading the book No More Mr. Nice Guy. And
that book.
yeah, it's great, right? Yeah. Anybody who hasn't listened to that book and feels like they're a little bit of a people pleaser, it's a great book to check out. Boundaries are a thing that we weren't modeled when we were younger, and so we struggle to set them and even understand them, and we sometimes react poorly when other people are setting healthy boundaries, because we were never shown that that's okay, and we always drop our boundaries, so it's infuriating when other people do, right? But the reality is that boundaries are an act of self-care, right? And so if you have a friend who's like dragging your energy down, or who's really negative, or who's like means well but is being unsupportive of the personal changes you'd like to make in your life, like let's say you want to give up drinking because you have an alcoholic father, or you notice it's not doing well with your body, and some guy, if he goes, come on you pussy, have a beer, like I'll give a guy one of those and I'll go, yeah, totally, man. But if he keeps at it, like man, that's not the energy you want to be around, right? Because I roll with a crew of guys who are like, oh, that's cool, good for you, man. Yeah, for sure, go get some sleep tonight. Yeah, take care of yourself, you got a big day tomorrow or whatever, so yeah, that opportunity cost of like, there are people out there who can be supportive in that way. Why would you invest any more energy and time into a person like that? That's an act of self-care. People might say it's ruthless, it's cold. No, I'm just taking care of myself. I want to be around people to make me feel good. Life is already hard enough. I don't need people around me who are going to hassle me or try to be negative about the changes I'm trying to make. Fuck that.
I couldn't agree more. I was in a situation like 2 weeks ago, and I wasn't drinking, and everyone's like, "Come on, have a scotch or something." Like, I got to fucking work tomorrow, and I just don't want to feel bad. Like, just let me sip on my water. My sparkling water is fine for me tonight. Like,
Yeah, what does it matter? You guys are gonna get drunk. You won't even know that I'm here
they
after a
did
few
it like
drinks.
7 times, and I was like, "This is why I don't hang out with this group of people, because it makes me upset, or not upset. I just get fucking pissed off with it. I'm like, just
Yeah, right.
no way, carry on with your day. I'm not sitting here saying drink sparkling water. Like,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the cool thing about boundaries that a lot of people and especially a lot of men don't realize, is that boundaries are the greatest way to qualify whether somebody should have a place in your life or not, especially a close place. Because if you go out with people and you set a very healthy boundary, like, hey, no, I'm going to have my cranberry juice tonight or whatever, and they give you a hard time for that and they don't respect it, that's showing their character. That has nothing to do with you. And so now I actually look forward to set boundaries, because it really says a lot about them. If somebody says, hey, can you do this thing for me? And I say, you know what, I'd love to help you out, but I'm overwhelmed right now. Men's group's blowing up. I can't keep up. I got a girlfriend, a dog, and I start telling them about my life. And if they're like, if they give me a hard time about that, or guilt trip me or shame me, nope. I'm not gonna, that they're now deprioritized. I might not cut them out right away, but like, they're not in that. I'm not gonna keep them close, because like, I have good friends that'll be like, oh man, good for you, or oh great, cool, let's hang out another time or whatever.
Spot on, man. So you've touched, obviously, boundaries, etc., being some common things. Are there any other common things that show up in the men's group?
Oh yeah, good question. Boundaries is probably number one, because a lot of conversations come back to boundaries, whether it's relationships or work conflicts or family stuff. It's like, it's usually you didn't set a boundary, or you didn't communicate it clear enough, or what to do after boundaries have been crossed. The other big ones are how to recover from a breakup or divorce. Porn addiction is a really common one. Communication, learning how to communicate better, how to manage emotions, what to do with anger, how to overcome a loss, how to save or rock your relationship, emotional intelligence, social intelligence, stuff like that.
It's wild for everyone listening. Like, just practice having those conversations, and if you don't feel like you can have them with um, your mates or the people that you spend time around with, then searching men's group is probably a good place to tune in.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Okay, so we've already established, even here in this conversation, the impact that like a positive, supportive friend can have, or group can have on you, right? And the negative, detrimental impacts, right? And so it's like, okay, what do we do next? How do we actually go out there and find support pillars for ourselves, right? And that takes energy, that takes time. You have to be intentional, like finding people like this that are more, I hate to use the word, but like a bit more evolved, or a bit more awake, or a bit more focused on personal growth. They're the minority. The most people are out there numbing away, distracting, you know, spending their nights drinking themselves to sleep, yelling at their wife or whatever, you know. So it's like, it takes time, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it, because you go to one of these men's groups or you meet somebody like you, or and there'll be one guy there where it's like, just like what happened to you now. It's like, oh bro, you surf? I
Yeah.
surf. And it's like, you share all the interests that I share with these other dudes that I was hanging out with before, who couldn't have the real talk, but you can also have the real talk. And so we could be out there surfing, but like talking about my relationship issues, or, you know, I could call you up if something was going down and I need to be there. And like, that's awesome that I can still do all the things I used to do with my old friends, but like we also can be there for each other. You know, that's
That's
what I want.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. And for those there's going to be people who have definitely listened to it. Like, I'm some of my closest mates now are dudes who've come in through the Man That Can project, and
Yeah.
like we surf, we go, like we do all these things together, and like you still have good times like you do with your mates. But then when, like you said, when you need that conversation or you need to ask for advice or you need to just talk about something that maybe you don't feel comfortable with other people, like they're there for you, and it works. It's reciprocal, right? As you mentioned, like the relationship has to be reciprocal. If it's not,
Yeah.
that's where you got to start thinking about, all right, am I putting too much energy into this relationship and not getting it back?
Yeah, true. And I want to be clear that like neither you nor I are advocating, Lockie, for like not having a good time, or like not razzing your friends, or not
Oh,
making
right.
dick jokes, or not like, you
Yeah,
know,
I'm all
like
for
you
that.
can be that. You can be an alpha male and like the sports guy, you know, while still having like a couple guys that you're close to, and in your, you know, in your one-on-one time with them, you can talk about real stuff. Like that's the ideal, right? Because then you have the best of both
Just
worlds.
being you and
Yeah.
exploring that. As you said, curious about people. I don't remember whether you said this on the podcast or before we were talking,
I think it
but
was
like,
before.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're definitely curious about people, and it's be curious about yourself, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, conversations with your mate, what your mates are feeling, what your mates are experiencing. Because I just remember times in my life where people in my life were going through shit, like a relationship breakdown, and we never spoke about it. We'd go talk about the footy, and then you'd see they break up, and you go, I never saw that coming. You guys were going so well, and like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Haven't been good for like 12 months, and you're like,
Yeah. And the truth is that that guy's dying inside.
yeah,
Like he's sad. He's upset. He should be. He's losing up his life. He's losing a partner, you know, even if it's a positive thing. It's like, there's still so much there that he
change
could
it.
benefit from getting off his chest, or, you know, getting feedback or guidance around from somebody else who's been through a divorce, for example, or whatever, you know. But
100%.
most guys just sit there. And it's that Joe Rogan brought this quote to light for me in his podcast. It's a Henry David Thoreau quote. It's, most men lead lives of quiet desperation.
That
Yeah.
is beautiful,
Yeah.
man.
And I don't know how long he said, this guy said it like 100 years ago, but I still find that so true to be so true today. It's like this subtle, peculiar desperation, isolation, where we have friends, we're out at the bar with our buds, but we're not talking about any of the stuff that's actually on our minds.
Well, when was, oh, you've probably done it often, but I think about this every time I go to a cafe by myself or anything like that. Like, as soon as I'm there in line, rather than just being curious around what's going on, I'm like, pull out my phone,
Oh
Facebook.
yeah, all the time. Yeah. Yeah.
Something that I challenge myself to do, and sometimes the blokes to do, is like, go have a burger by yourself, or go have a beer by yourself, and just sit there and don't use technology as a distraction. Just look at what's going on in the world, and you may even, and it's when you go traveling, like you go on a Kentucky tour or anything like that, you end up making new friends that are awesome because you're there
Yes.
to have a good time. You're in the zone. You can do that every fucking day of your life,
Yeah.
but we just aren't intentional. You spoke about this earlier, intentional with our time, that we go, okay, I'll just distract myself on the phone. You might miss meeting your life partner as they walk by and you're too busy on Instagram. And once again, I'm guilty of this all the time, everyone. So
Yeah. 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 We're not perfect with any of
yeah,
this either.
but I'm aware of it, and I set myself times where I want to give it a crack. And I just notice I feel uncomfortable. Like I really do, but
Yeah.
it's fun to put myself in that situation.
Well, I think you just touched on one of like the greatest exercises, if not the ultimate healing exercise for men. That's not kooky and only takes like a minute. It's like, Anytime you feel an impulse to do something, like if you're in line at the bank and you want to check your phone, instead just sit there and breathe and see what comes up. That's it. Just like, what were you trying to avoid in that moment that made you want to pull up the phone? What were you trying to avoid in that moment that made you pull up the porn? You know, what feelings were going on? What came to mind? Because it's always something, right? Impulse is always driven by some kind of thought.
Definitely.
Aside from our basic impulses, but survival ones and stuff. But yeah, I mean, that for me has been one of the most healing exercise that comes up again and again and again and again in men's group is like, anytime you have an impulse to do the thing that you stop wanting to do, and this is more like on when people are talking about bad habits or whatever to trying to break, it's like, instead stop and just hang out with that, be present with it, and just keep doing that. And eventually like more feelings will start to come up and you'll just start to build a relationship with that part of yourself.
You have to build it up or break it down to build it up. And we, at the last workshop we ran, I did some visualization. Then we had like a sound healer, all this stuff that I think, would have hated to have done when I was a bloke and wasn't open to new stuff. But it's if you can look past that, and if you can actually just and you can just allow yourself to feel, like you said, like just sit there and feel. Like when you've got all these sounds going on, different vibrations, like shit does come up. And we had blokes crying there, like grown men crying, who were just like, that was the most incredible experience or release that I've ever had.
Yeah.
And like even breath work to a degree, like doing a lot of stuff when you just sit in it and feel. But as you said at the start, blokes are either, what was it, like anger or happy? Like
either angry or happy.
Yeah, they're the two things we're looking for. Anything else, we're like, nah, this is scary. I don't want to go there. I either got to make myself angry or happy to get out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
It's such an interesting thing. So I think that's a very important thing you touched on there. Just allowing yourself to feel, and it just fuck the stigma off around it being sissy or soft or whatever goes through your head. Just fuck it off and just allow yourself to be in that moment. Even if it's watching The Notebook and you feel like tearing up, do it.
Oh man, that's the best. I don't want to make it sound like we're too feminine, like it's super feminine. Oh, you gotta throw in The Notebook here, but it's like the reason why that's the best is because these are natural systems that we have, and when you're cool with them, when you acknowledge them, when you like make presence for them, and you let the waves of those emotions pass, on the other side of that is a feeling of like clearness and lightness and like contentment that we don't often get to feel day to day.
100%.
Yeah, so it's not about crying more, it's about like getting that stuff out so we can go back to feeling good again.
Yeah, 100%. And sorry if it looks like I'm checking. As we're talking, for everyone, I always take a million notes and questions that I want to circle back to. So I'm just looking down. I'm like, oh, where did I want to go back to?
I was on TikTok, so sorry about that. That's not a problem. Sorry. I'm just Instagramming about you right now.
That's on my iPad.
Yeah, exactly.
I need the big screen. But
totally.
For yourself, like going to men's group and also obviously chatting with a heap of blokes there, like what are some of the skills that you've learned from that? Because often we feel that the way to learn things is through tertiary education or certain things like that, but there's so much to be taken away from going to a men's group. There's so many skills that you can develop.
Can I answer that in a second? I just want to round off the last point that you're mentioning about the standing in line with the impulse to pull your phone, get distracted. No, you didn't at all. And I like the next question. I just want to hammer this point home. And I wish somebody would have told me this when I was a younger man. It's like that relationship with yourself and everything that's going on inside of you. That is it. That is all there is. That is the thing that will lead to you feeling more successful, happier, and seeing more external results as well. Like those little things, standing in line for the bank and just taking a moment to just instead of pulling out in the distraction machine or whatever it might be, eating the junk food, pulling up the porn, it's like just hang out with yourself for a little bit.
I hope you're not pulling up the porn at the bank.
Yeah. I wouldn't put it past myself, man. I've probably done stuff like that,
Yeah. Or me.
Desperate times call for desperate measures, right? I probably have, man. I've done some really gnarly stuff, and it's because I was just, I was ignoring that part of myself. And so the thing is that like getting in that stuff will make you a much more solid, unfazable, strong man.
Yep.
That is the result. So I just want to encourage guys to get into that stuff however they can. Journaling, therapy, meditation, somatic meditation, whatever else, psychedelics, whatever else people do. It's like
Psychedelics keep popping up. I really want to try them. I've done a heap. Sound like an expert here. Back in the day, I used to love all kinds of illicit substances, and some would make you hallucinate, and others wouldn't. But I had a real bad trip. Probably 2011, and I just haven't gone near it ever since. But now, the more that I listen to podcasts and hear even mates up here who've tried certain things, I'm very curious to see what it can do. But I also really just, if I do ever do it, would want to be in an environment where I trust them, not some random shaman that I've never met before.
Yeah. Were you using them in like a party context before?
Yeah.
So that's the thing, right?
Uncontrolled.
Yeah, right. So they can be used for that, right? Which is fun. And I don't have a lot of experience with that. Even as a DJ, I was kind of scared of that stuff. And also as an athlete background, I was just was sort of, I don't know, felt like that wouldn't help me get to where I want to go. But I had so many friends that I look up to and respect over the last few years mentioned the therapeutic benefits of doing them in a very intentional way and seeing the changes they actually made in their life. I was like, wow, that's cool. So I started exploring it last year, and I've been increasing the amount I've been doing. And man, this is all I'll say about it. And I don't want to encourage anybody to do drugs. That's not, but I will share my experience that like, even as getting into this stuff, part of myself for the last 5 years now, journaling, therapy, somatic meditation, all these ceremonies and, gong, like you said, sound healings and stuff, exploring all that, like, and really retraining myself how to feel and cry and repairing the relationships with my mom and my dad and all this stuff. It's like, I can get into it and I can get into the emotions. However, mushrooms in particular have been the only thing that have like really gotten a lot of that stuff out. Every time I do a big journey with them in a very safe environment where I feel very safe with the right person or people who can be there, it is extremely cathartic. And I always feel lighter and more clear and way less triggered after around the things that I'm usually triggered by. So that's all I have to say about that.
That's consistent to what I've heard. But once again, as you mentioned, we're not encouraging people to go out and do all that sort of stuff.
No, it's just another healing tool people can use. And so if your journey takes you there, great. If not, it's great. I just, I last weekend I did what's known as a hero's dose of mushrooms, and I've never done that much before.
Badass.
Yeah. And the whole point is to lose yourself. So ego dissolution. And so all that part of you that wants to like, no, I'm Sean, I'm this way, I'm this kind of person, that all goes away. And so we were left with stuff. And I just want to share the story quickly that like my problem for all these years has been overworking, focused externally, not taking care of myself. Is your friend walking by or what?
No, I was just saying I'm the same.
Oh yeah, you're just working too hard. Yeah, like overworking. I was like, why can't I take care of myself? Why can't I just rest? Right. Anyway, I go into this experience and I actually got to tap into this experience that I had with my family, and particularly my father, where he was quite emotionally intense with me, I'll put it that way, and without revealing too many details, and just how that made me feel like I needed to run. And that was the feeling that I had. I'm not safe. I need to run. I can't stop. I can't rest. And so on the outside, you look at Sean, his Facebook and his businesses, and it's like, wow, that guy's been successful. But it's partly because I've been running from like these uncomfortable feelings. Actually being able to feel those for the first time in my life, maybe ever. That's pretty cool.
That's awesome. The running away seems to be a common thing for a lot of the shit that goes on in people's lives, in blokes especially. But circling back into obviously how the men's groups have helped you and all like.
Sorry, that took a detour.
No,
That's such a hot topic.
I've always wanted to have that discussion. I'm so interested in it, as I mentioned, but
Yeah. I don't even know if we're allowed to have that discussion, so you might have to check on that and edit that part out later. But
no, man,
I think it's fine.
this is fine. I don't. Whatever happens, happens. That's the beauty of conversation. You don't know where it's going.
Yeah.
It's like when you jump on YouTube or Reddit and you end up down this rabbit hole just by clicking suggested topics and bang.
Yeah. There it is. Boom.
Don't know how to
Yeah.
get there. But yeah, some of the skills that you've learnt and things that you've seen men grow or ways that men have grown from the men's groups.
Yeah. So you mean skills that I've learned, or you mean like?
But both, yeah. For
Okay.
yourself.
Okay. So I'll talk about myself first, just because that's how you ordered the questions.
Yep.
The biggest takeaway I've had from running men's groups, and whether it's that entrepreneur, adventure group where we went skiing and skydiving and surf trips or whatever, or whether it's mensgroup.com, it's the same. It's like guys actually really want to talk about this stuff. They just don't feel safe in doing so because they were ridiculed earlier in life for doing so. So I'm consistently amazed, even with guys that I think won't open up, they do, as long as they observe other guys doing it and not, then those other guys don't get judged. If they're met with a supportive vibe, then typically everybody will open up. So I find that incredibly beautiful, knowing that even these really badass, hardened dudes, like, really do want to talk about the real stuff. They just don't have the chance to.
It's unreal.
Yeah. And so I guess part two of that is like, okay, well, as a men's group leader, then the question I get a lot is, well, how do you get men to open up? And it's like, I lead by example. I walk in there, and just because I'm the center of I'm the ringleader, like they look up to me a little bit. And so right off the bat, I'll share some of my stuff and a little opening speech. I might stage it so that I share that the reason why I get into men's groups is because I've been cheated on in a number of relationships, or because I had addiction issues, or because, I went bankrupt in my early 20s. Like, I share these things that most people don't share. And then I'll often plant, like, the first guy in the men's group I'll start with is a guy who's got some really emotional personal thing, and so I've shared, then this guy shared and maybe cried or something, and then everybody else in the circle goes, okay, I can share too. And some guys don't. Some guys, they've been conditioned so much that they just can't. But I think that's really beautiful. That's probably what I've learned the most from these things. Can you relate to that?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, even just that massive sigh, because even if the circle, you're the last person, I know a lot of people are in their head the whole time going, what am I going to say? What am I going to talk about? Do I have something? And they just don't be, and we've spoken about this or touched on this a number of times in this chat, but like the importance of being present, like just forgetting about what's going on, let your mind stop racing and just listen, just see what's in front of you. And when the time comes, like I always encourage people to introduce themselves, because I often find, even if someone's like, once they say, hi, I'm Lockie, and that sounds like AA, but that's actually just a fucking normal greeting, everyone.
Yeah.
I'm Lockie. And then they'll, I just came to listen, but blah, blah, blah. And then they'll be talking for another 10 minutes. And
Yeah, that's it.
It's just that opening that people need. And often, yeah, we don't do that because people ask you a question, how you going, in while they're passing by or whatever. There's never that sit down and just chill out and I'm ready to actually listen.
Yeah, and a lot of people are scared of their own feelings, right? So they don't want to go there either. So they're not actually going to ask you or actually sit around and listen to it. So, like, a lot of guys, it's just foreign to them, right? And they're scared, so they're scared to go there, as we are with any foreign thing. In the brotherhood and the men's group we had before, where we did the adventure trips, we did something similar where, when we'd show up, it was mandatory where everybody had to give everybody a hug. And at first it feels so forced, but it's like, man, this guy's because it was called the brotherhood. So I'd be like, man, this guy's your brother. Give your brother a hug. And then guys would be like, okay. And they give them the pat in the back hug. And that helped immediately, just like took their guard down. Time and time again, I got that feedback. They said that was really helpful.
And
I think,
sorry, you go.
Sir, go ahead. No, you go for it.
I was just going to say, when I lived when I was playing over in France,
yeah,
the whole footy team would shake hands and kiss on the cheek. And they would do that to every player. And like, if you've got a squad of 30 blokes, that takes a fair time.
Yes, it does.
In Australia, you'll just go straight to your closest mates or whatever, and you'll say g'day to someone when you start training. But the fact that they did that every time, kiss, shake hand, g'day, I was just like, this is incredible. Like, they actually take the time to build that relationship, and you feel like you are one team, not just hanging out with the backs or the forwards or whatever position
Right.
you were playing. It's very interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. Man, I love that you played professional sports and played rugby. That's so cool. Rugby is like the most badass sport that I've ever played, and I couldn't hang in there, man. Too rough.
Man, it's definitely way too rough for me. I was like, no way.
Yeah, and then with regards to the guys, like, what do I see them learning the most? And honestly, the biggest, most consistent trend I see is that the guys learn that they can communicate this way with other people in their lives too. Like after being in 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 meetings, it's like they can then take a little bit of that and go back to their lives, go back to their friends, go back to their families, and they can go there a bit more. They can be a little bit more vulnerable. They can share the real stuff, knowing that, hey, chances are I'm not going to get made fun of for it. I'm not going to be called gay or weak or whatever, and that's beautiful. That's probably the biggest takeaway. Have you noticed that as well?
Yeah, definitely noticed that. And I just think it's awesome, as you touched on, was that you've got men from all walks of life, like sitting there together as one. And it's like any other place in the world, you would be judging them so hard out. Like,
Oh yeah.
no, I can't talk to them. They look tough and mean, or like they look like a sissy, or whatever it is. And they could be the one person that you need to talk to in your life. They could have that one bit of information that's going to change your life. And that's why for me, like 7 years ago when I read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and one of the habits is like seek to understand before being understood. Like I always take that approach with my life. Like everyone's an expert in something that I'm not. My goal is to find out what that is by asking
Yeah.
questions and everything like that.
Yeah, that's great. That's such a great attitude, right? Because these people do always have gifts to bring and wisdom that they can share with you. And often it's in stuff that could actually be useful, but we're too quick to write them off. I see it in men's groups a lot. It's often the guy that triggers you the most, or the guy that you're like right off, is the guy who ends up sharing a perspective that's counter to yours, which is the whole point of why you're there.
Exactly.
Right. And it's like, yeah, those guys, I see it again and again, even in my own men's group, There are guys that are more like me, like you and I. We're pretty similar. We're cut from the same cloth, right? Sports, back in the day, probably women,
Yep.
All sorts of similar interests and stuff. But it's like, in a men's group, I typically learn from guys that are really quiet, or guys that really have a completely different background, or in the military, or stuff that I don't even understand. But like the perspective they bring from that's just really impactful.
100%. I've got 2 more questions for you because I know it's getting late.
I don't care, man. I'm loving this. So we can keep going as long as you want. Just your poor listeners I'm concerned for, with me rambling on and on.
I was like, I don't know what time you go to bed. I'm normally in bed by like 8:39. And
yeah, I'm a 9:30 guy, but it's okay. That's all good.
Doing well, and in the heat, disgusting.
Oh man, I'm boiling up. Like I swear I'm not usually this red. I'm not usually sweating. I'm not hiding anything. I swear.
I thought you'd be sitting there with the shirt off, chilled.
I thought about it. I was like, fuck it. They either like me or they don't. I don't care.
Yeah. I'll be me, mate. I'd always
I'll be me.
But for you, what's your definition of being a man?
It's so funny because I've been asked this before, and it's a great question, man. And I like the smirk you had in your face there, putting me on the spot with this. You enjoy that, don't you? Yeah. I'm really curious to hear your answer, Lockie. But the answer I give, and I think, is I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. My experience is I have a deeper voice. I like to hit things in sports. I can move furniture. I'm in my relationship. I play a bit of a masculine role. So there's certain like parts of that roles or duties that I fulfill, and she likes that. Beyond that, I don't really think about it too much. I've never been that consumed by gender or what that means. I can tell you what I've learned is the most important quality in a man. It's to be unfazable, the rock, the mountain in the storm. That's what people want from men, especially our romantic partners, especially women. They want you to be the safe container that they can do the chaotic, emotional whirlwind around you in the traditional dynamic of male female polarity anyway. And so that as I get into this emotional stuff, as I cry this stuff out from my past, as I continue to work on myself, it's like I'm becoming more and more grounded and unshakable, and I don't get triggered as much. And It's like the guy who like has a great career and all the money and like the hot wife, but then he goes to the bar and gets wasted and then comes home and screams at his wife and hits his, like, that's not a man, right? The man is the guy who's just solid and can show up for other people. And that requires that I think that a lot of that emotional work, unless you've just hit the genetic lottery and you had perfect parents. But I've only met like on one hand out of probably 100,000 people in my lifetime, and on one hand have I met people like that. So it's like, that's what I think, if I'd be focused on being a man, is about. It's like continuing to get into that stuff so you can be more and more unfazable.
Yeah, that's awesome. Beautiful answer.
What do you think? What's your answer? I'm curious because, as you can tell, I don't really have a good answer to this.
Well, I think, and the reason why I ask it and I don't ever tell anyone about it is I think there's stereotypes around what a man should be, or traits of a man.
Yeah.
And a lot of us feel like we don't fit into that. So we build the persona, which is what I did to try and fit that mold. But it left me feeling how you sort of felt in Mexico, lonely and unfulfilled and confused. So for me, it was what I strive to do is just be certain in myself and clear for how I want to treat people and treat myself. Like, I don't, once again, I don't overthink it, but every action that I take on a daily basis, I want it to be as intentional as possible, because we don't know when our time's up. And I want people to just feel better off having had a conversation with me, or having, known me. So that's every intention is like, okay. And I know that by looking after myself, looking after my physical health, growing, spending time on myself, that selfish stuff, self-care, but selfish stuff, some people may view it, allows me to do that better.
Yeah, that's great. And I've learned through observing a men's group that, like, most guys don't really want to talk about sports. Most guys don't really want to talk about boobs and beer or whatever the traditional guy talks about. So like, if you don't fit that mold, it's okay. That doesn't mean you're any less of a man. You can be introverted and quiet, but still show up for the people in your life. Still, take responsibility for your emotions and your triggers and how you communicate and how you, show up for other people. That's being a man.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And lastly, where can everyone find? Oh, first, this is probably going to be a couple apart, but it is the last.
Yeah, hit me. I like it. Yeah, let's keep going.
But where can people find you? How can they get involved? What's it like being involved? And if anything else sort of rolls off of that, and it's all online? Like, is it online, in person?
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. So mensgroup.com is the website. You'll go there. You'll find a blog with a bunch of helpful resources and great videos of all these leading men that are, talking about common issues that we all face. On there, you can, join the movement, just opt in to be a part of the community by submitting your email address. You can access our free discussion area there. You can try the free men's group for yourself, see if you like it. We have free men's groups going at all different days and time zones and stuff. And then from there, we have, you can give yourself access to the community or join a regular men's team ongoing. So it's all there, but I just recommend guys take any step, whether that be listening to a podcast or a book that you recommend, or I recommend. Working with a coach like you has been tremendously valuable for me. Also just giving something like this a community, trying something different, because if you think about it, all the guys that join a community are looking for the same things as you. They want to talk about more meaningful things. They want to build real friendships and find themselves in real conversations. And so that's just give something like this a shot, even if it's for free. Try out a men's group, try out this, try out that, try out some of the therapies you recommended. So that's really it. Mensgroup.com. You'll find me there.
Simple.
I didn't give that answer in a very simple way, but yeah, try a free men's group.
That's perfect. Well, Sean, I truly appreciate your time. It's been a fun conversation. I've taken away a heap. It's even helped me understand my own thoughts.
So as a guy who's running men's groups, what have you found interesting about? I'm just curious. Like, what do you find interesting about, like, because I've been doing men's groups for 10 years and I probably run 1,000. Like, what have you found interesting about what I've said here? Just, I'm curious to know what you take away that might be interesting to the guys.
Yeah. A lot of it, like for me, obviously going back to boundaries, but a lot of the things that we touched on go back to just taking ownership.
Yeah.
The more we take ownership for the things that are happening in our life, the more, that's acknowledging the awareness that this is happening, this is what I'm feeling, then we can learn to manage it for the things that are going well in our life, the people that are going well, and the people, places, or things that aren't, fuck them off and fill it up with better stuff. But, you know, boundaries are the act of self-care, but they're also how you qualify who gets time in your life. That was, for me, was there's so much, but it doesn't need to be. One of the biggest things is it doesn't have to be how a lot of people maybe perceive it. We can still be blokes. You can still shoot the shit, but when you need to, or when your mates need to, you'll feel confident and comfortable to be able to have those conversations.
That's great. I think it's worth finding people like that. If I'm here selling anything, it's that. It's like, however you can access it, you know, go and build some supportive community. Find those 1 or 2 or 3 supportive people who will have an impact in your life. It can be a lot of hassle and it can be very humbling trying to find them, but man, it's worth it. Yeah.
Definitely. All good things come to those who work for it. Not
Yeah.
wait.
I guess so. Most of the time anyway.
Yeah.
Man, I just love what you're doing. Please keep it up. Yeah, we're going to be in touch because I just love everything about the man that can. I'm just a big fan.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, man.